it off. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. We are still in Event Wellbeing Month. We've had a fantastic month, lots of different events been going on for the last few weeks, and we're just down to the final few now. But we've got a great session coming up today, and this is a special session because our lovely friends at ILEA are joining us today and being part of the session. So we thank them very much for their support as always, and supporting us through this session today. We have the lovely Bonnie Wims, who's going to be running the session for us today. But before we get into all of that, I just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping bits. So obviously throughout the session, if you wouldn't mind making sure your mics are all on mute. I know we are all getting used to Zoom and having our cameras off now, but if there is anybody that would like to turn their camera on, we're just trying to kind of persuade people to show their faces if you would like to, because obviously if we were in a live environment we would be seeing each other, but obviously if you don't feel like you want to show your face, then we're not going to make you. But I just wanted to see if anyone's out there. We've got a couple of people have come in. That's great, thank you. So without further ado, first of all I'm just going to introduce Carlo, who is the past president for ILEA. He's just going to do a little brief intro about ILEA and the relationship between ILEA and Event Well. So Carlo, I'll hand over to you.
Fantastic, thanks very much. Welcome to today's session. It's very exciting to be part of this from an ILEA's perspective. For those that don't know, ILEA is an association of event professionals. We're obviously very passionate about knowledge, networking and event creativity. ILEA basically is a membership. And we have a global membership of over 5,000 event professionals, which includes monthly educational network events, going out to a platform of professionals within the events community. And that includes everything from venues to suppliers to freelancers. So we're quite a diverse and inclusive association. Anyone who'd like to join, obviously more than welcome to jump onto ileauk.org to find more about us. But we really hope that you enjoy today's session. For us, Event Well and ILEA have enjoyed a fantastic partnership over many years now, and enjoying and promoting, wellness, diversity and inclusion. Things like today is all part of that as we go through Event Wellness Week. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Carlo. It's great to have you here, and thank you for being here today. Without further ado, I'm going to hand straight over to Bonnie, who's taking us through this great session this afternoon. If anybody has any comments or any questions throughout the session, if anything comes up for you, then obviously please refer down to the chat box, which is at the bottom of your screen. So feel free to type anything in there, any comments or any questions. Any questions we will probably run through at the end, and we'll have a bit of a question and answer session. So anything that comes up for you, please feel free to type it in, and we'll do those at the end of Bonnie's session. But yeah, Bonnie, away you go.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Carlo. I'm so thrilled that this is happening. I think it's so important. Always, obviously, as a psychologist, I think mental health is at the top of the priority list, but especially now, I think it's a very challenging time for people in a lot of ways. And every conversation you have with someone, there is a sense of having to adapt and change and pivot, which is the word we were just discussing. And so it's hard because when I work with clients, there's a real strong sense of, life is moving on and you have your regular everyday challenges. And then all of us have these extra challenges that have been brought onto us by a pandemic and all of the ramifications of that sort of ripple across our lives. So thank you all for being here. I hope this is a useful presentation for you. I'm going to talk a bit about a growth mindset and adapting to uncertainty, because I certainly think uncertainty is what we are all experiencing right now. So I think I can go ahead and share my screen. Is that right?
Yes, you should be able to, yeah. share screen at the bottom. Yeah, there we go.
There we are. So before I go into too much about myself, I wanted you all to just sort of think about your self-talk and the way in which you talk to yourself on any given day. And I think that's something that as a therapist, I talk with people a lot because it's not something maybe that we're always as aware of as we should be. If you think about it, you've got sort of a running dialogue in your mind all day long. And if you think about it, just quickly right now, how often in a day do you think you do say something negative to yourself about yourself? So you've got this sort of thinking mind that's constantly going. And then we have this sort of judgment of that, the way in which we think about what we're thinking about. And it sounds a little funny, but it does go on constantly inside of our heads, even if we're not aware of it. So if you think about it and you think about the way in which you speak to yourself, how often do you think that's a negative thing? And be honest, because we all do it. And the best way to change anything, obviously, is to become aware of the way in which we approach things. So I'll tell you just a little bit about myself. I am a counseling psychologist by training. I actually lived in London, England. I live in New York City now. Obviously, I'm not British, but I lived in London for about 7 years. I got my counseling psychology training there, and I had a pretty standard bricks and mortar practice. And I came to it later in life. I spent first half of my career doing something that was never a goal of mine. It's just one of those careers you fall into and then it pays the bills. And so for a lot of years, I was just waiting for the chance to get back to school, to get to what I really loved and always wanted to do, which was psychology and therapy. So finally in London, I was able to do that and had a practice. The financial crisis happened, and eventually my family and I moved back to the States. And that's when I began to work on the idea of working online with people. I actually had clients from London who approached me with the idea if we could continue to work together. So what we did was we gave it a try, and it actually was really fantastic. And what it did was it helped me provide a bit more of a flexible and affordable option to people, maybe that in-person therapy wasn't always the same as available in the same way. So fast forward now, I live in Manhattan and I worked exclusively online. So lucky for me, kind of had a business model that was COVID friendly. But I know that not everybody's that fortunate. I know a lot of people are in industries or working in ways that right now it's not available in the same way. So we were just talking earlier about the necessary option inside of your mind for you to try to think about things in a bit of a different way in order to open up possibilities for yourself. And it all starts with your self-talk. It all starts with that dialogue that's inside of your mind. And I think a lot of us just don't realize that our behavior gets driven by that conversation we have internally. So I'd like to talk just a little bit about uncertainty. Poor lady, I've just frozen her in a terrible facial expression, but some of us can feel this way, you know, this sense of uncertainty. It makes us feel there's something that gives us a sense of calm to be able to plan. You know, some of us are better planners than others, but everyone likes to have a bit of a plan. You like to be able to think that you know what's going to happen in the coming days, maybe months, even year. And so within that inability to plan, there's this sense of being out of control, that we don't have the control over our lives that we normally have, which is completely normal given the circumstances right now, thinking about how much is not within our control. I know for myself, I had a granddaughter. Our first grandchild was born in January. And thankfully, she's in Florida, but thankfully we did go there in February and I got to meet her. But ever since then, it has been a relationship of, you know, Zoom and FaceTime calls. she is, oblivious to that this is any different than normal. And I think she just thinks her grandmother lives in this little tiny screen. And so she has become very adept at speaking with me that way. She's not speaking, but and so there's this relationship we have developed now. I'm really curious when she meets me, what she's going to think, if she's going to recognize me out of this telephone screen. But I haven't been able to plan a visit, and I know in ordinary times probably would have already been there again, or at very least booked something to be there, or they would be here. And so that inability to plan for that feeling of that some outside forces are controlling my ability to do what I want, or do what I really, my heart wants to do, it's really hard on me. And it's also just fills me with this constant sense of uncertainty, because when will I be able to plan? When will I be able to see her? But that coping within this uncertainty, the way you think about the situation, the way you then go about trying to problem solve the situation, how creative and diverse you can be in the way you approach it, directly impacts your ability to cope with it. Because if you go down one path that's definitely more negative, or thinking about the impossibility of all of it, you can see where your internal dialogue can then shape your behavior and the way in which you feel about the whole thing. So let's let her move a little bit. Okay, so resilience. I think resilience is one of those words that I think anytime you say it, it has an impact. You are all probably thinking right now about a definition. And if you could, if you feel like it, you could pop that into the chat box if you feel like thinking about what are the words that pop in your mind when you think about resilience. Do you feel that you have resilience, or do you know someone who has resilience? And what does that bring up for you? Like, what do you think about? How does that show up in somebody? How would you know if they were resilient? And while you're thinking about that, you might actually honestly think about somebody that you think is resilient. I was just saying during our earlier talk that Carlo was talking about the way that they've pivoted their business. And I was saying that he was exhibiting, without recognizing it, I think, the resilience that is necessary for them to pivot in their business. So do you ever notice that there are some people that just do seem to cope better with challenges? Things are hard for them. They might be experiencing the same difficulties or other difficulties in their lives as we are. But do you realize that you see sometimes it just doesn't seem to take them down in the same way? Or if it does impact them, they don't stay down very long. You ever thought about what is it about them that seems to allow for them to take on challenges in a different sort of way, and maybe respond to them in a way that's less negative and a bit more hopeful? And if you ever wonder when you meet these people, what is it about them? Why can they do that? Are they just better at it than we are? Or were they just lucky enough to be born with a resilient gene? Or is life just maybe easier for them? And I think we all can wonder about that sometimes. If you do see someone or recognize that there's seems to be something about somebody that is allowing them to just be a bit more resilient. So I don't know what kind of words you're thinking about when you think about the word resilience, but there's a lot of research, psychological research on resilience. It's been a topic, word that I've been fascinated with since I was in my undergrad. And I think I wrote a paper, an honors paper on it for my graduation, because I was that fascinated. And thinking about then and now, how much more we've learned about it. It's the idea about bouncing back, that ability to bounce back from adversity. It's not that these people don't have things happen to them. It's not that they were born with a special gene. And it's not that they're better than us. It's the fact that there's something innately in there that gives them the sense of being able to bounce back easier. And along with that, the key second part of resilience is that you grow from the experience. So it's not just that you bounce back and that you're able to respond better, but that you actually grow from the experience. So you take the challenge and you learn something. So resilience is kind of twofold in that way. And that's the way psychology has begun to sort of define it and research it in that way. There's so much good research out there now. But I think what's really exciting for me and the way that I've begun to work with clients now is understanding that none of us are really born with that necessarily. Maybe some people have traits that lend themselves better to it, but that resilience is teachable. And so for me, that's the most exciting part, because it's something to notice maybe where our thought patterns are challenging, maybe the way we talk to ourselves and the way we think is not so helpful. That's one thing, is to become aware of that. But what's so exciting for me with therapy is that teaching people how to change that, to really help people become aware of their thinking patterns and help them change. So you're not doomed if you don't have resilience. It's something that can be taught, and excellent studies are teaching us therapists on how to teach that. So I've encountered clients that have gone through a lot of therapy in their lives at times. And one thing they say to me kind of universally is, okay, I've intellectually become aware of some things. I hear myself when I say things that are less than positive, or I hear myself thinking about the negative of something, or I hear myself calling myself names, but I don't know how to change it. And so they get stalled. They sort of get stalled in this kind of limbo period where they're much more aware of their patterns, but they haven't been taught how to do anything about it. So that's where those unhelpful thoughts, the unhelpful way we may have of speaking to ourselves, that's where training and resilience and working with people on resilience is where I can really actually help them change that. Now, I'm not going to say that's easy, because depending on when I meet someone, they may have lived a long time, excuse me, having these thought patterns and thinking about things in a certain way. So a real common thing, if you were my client, you'd hear me say, changing these thought patterns is a bit like turning an ocean liner. It's not a speedboat. We can't just go, okay, I don't want to do that anymore, and stop, because it's influenced by what we've gone through. It's influenced by our experiences. So we make decisions about our lives and ourselves based on our lifelong experiences. If you've had a lot of challenges, if you were born into some challenges, you're going to be more likely to maybe have some thought patterns that aren't as helpful to you as others. But in trying to change this into thinking about our thought patterns and trying to understand, it is definitely something that is changeable, and we can work on it. And it takes what it takes, but being patient with yourself and understanding that you're trying to change maybe some habitual long-term thinking patterns, and it's not going to happen overnight. I won't have time to go into how I work with people completely right now, but I certainly am hoping today to just give you a trick or two to kind of get you down the path of thinking about, where are you in this whole continuum of resilience, and are there things that you can work on that can really help you develop some better skills that can help you in this challenging time. So studies have shown in a more practical way in thinking about resilience that we are influenced greatly by internal factors and external factors. And so if you think about your external factors, those are things that you really don't have control over. And so if you go all the way back to your birth, it's where you're born, who you're born to, whether you're born into poverty, or you're born with low birth rate, or you're born with two parents who have used drugs, or if there's been addiction in the family, or if there's abuse in the family, or you've grown up in a idyllic, happy setting. These external factors are out of our control. And these are things that we just experience. And especially as a very young child, we experience these external factors as just givens. We have no idea. I remember I was probably in year 3 or 4, the first time I had a sleepover at a friend's house. And in the morning when we got up for breakfast, I went into the kitchen and the mother was making breakfast, but they had like a an island in the kitchen, and we sat there to eat breakfast and the television was on. Now in my house, it's a very strict rule of no television during meals. So it was a shock. I remember being shocked and then very excited because I'd never been able to watch cartoons and eat my cereal before at the same time. It was the first sort of light bulb for me that people do things differently in different households. So in thinking about our external factors that we've been raised with and that we've grown up into, and the way in which we understand the world, it's very much personal to us, and it's very much personal to our experience, but it greatly impacts the way in which we see the world because it's our little picture. And I see the world through my lens and my experiences, and it shapes my view. If I've struggled, if I've had really hard times, or if there's just been a few significant events that have been very challenging, this definitely can impact my sense of self and the way in which I view myself in the world. This impacts then that self-dialogue I talked to you about. But then we have the internal. So internal factors, psychologists love to break things into categories and use different categories to try to understand things. So they develop sort of these thinking styles, which I'll go into in a little bit. But this can greatly influence our ability to handle negative consequences. So if you think about when I asked you at the very beginning, what do you say to yourself on a daily basis, and do you say negative things? As you have these external experiences, then your internal dialogue is greeting these external experiences, and your habitual ways of seeing the world and their habitual ways of understanding yourself in the world greatly then impacts your ability to cope with what's happening. So if you have a tendency to already think that you have a difficult time, then if, say, we've got the pandemic, it sort of slots into already maybe a negative view that you have of yourself and your coping ability. We're talking about people losing their jobs or careers not being possible right now due to certain things just not happening, like events and concerts and all of these things. I have a niece who's a dancer and a choreographer. Nothing is with her career is happening right now. So her ability to try to cope with that is directly involved with the way in which she then talks to herself about herself in this career, and then the confidence that she may have to then try to change that and adapt to do something that can, work within the restrictions that we have right now. So thinking about your internal view of the world, the internal way that you speak with yourself, and your constant external confrontation with the world, these things constantly work together all day long, every day, to give us a sense of whether or not we can manage what's happening to us and whether or not we have the flexibility to change. I hope this is making sense. If anybody doesn't think so, we can certainly answer some questions at the end. So why would I work with clients on resilience? Why would I, be talking about this right now? And why is it of any use to anybody anyway? Once again, psychologists, we love to break things into little categories. And so 4 fundamental uses for resilience really are, these are kind of the universal 4, is the ability to overcome. So you think about obstacles that happen and the way in which we can then manage what's happening to overcome it. If you have the ability to overcome, it comes with a sense of empathy because you can kind of see the big picture. Being able to overcome is the sense of kind of seeing it, stepping back, seeing the big picture, understanding where this is a challenge, but staying away from the unhelpful belief systems that maybe the external world is kind of putting on us right now. It's really easy right now to sort of say, well, 2020 should be canceled. Let's just forget 2020 and start over again next year. But as I remind people, if you try to think about other things that have happened this year, I, for one, have my first grandchild. I wouldn't want to cancel that. So trying to think about the big picture, stepping back from any unhelpful self-dialogue that is sort of going to an extreme place, helps you step back from it, think a bit more about the big picture, you can kind of overcome. Steering through, this is more about sort of the everyday challenges. You know, it's like getting up every morning and really coping with what's presenting to you every single day. I get up this morning knowing I have this presentation, and just being able to steer through that and pay attention to the way in which I'm coping with that challenge. It's about self-efficacy, really. It's about the ability to believe in yourself and to see that you're capable of steering through whatever life is going to throw at you today. Bouncing back is more about sort of like those big challenges. You know, it's like something devastating and terrible. And pandemic is probably falls right in that category. But other people, I'm sure you've heard, have had other really catastrophic or very horrible big things happen to them. Bouncing back is about trying to move through that in a way. I think a good example of that is, I think it's only in the States. I don't know that it's in the UK, but there's an organization called MADD, M-A-D-D. And this was founded by a woman who stands for Mothers Against Drunk Driving. And she came from it because her child was actually killed by a drunk driver. So terrible, devastating event, not something that would be easy to move through. The resilience would definitely need to be pulled in at some point to try to really help somebody bounce back from such a catastrophic event. But she did bounce back, and not only bounce back, but she founded MADD. And in that, it's purposeful action. It's taking the challenge and doing something that has meaning in it, that is a result of that challenge. And so bouncing back is really about giving yourself something purposeful, meaning making to attach to that helps you build that resilience. And the last one is reach out. And ironically, as a therapist, when I completely believe in reaching out, that's why I'm here, this is one that I kind of, in the resilience testing, I always score sort of low on, which kind of surprises me, kind of, but if I'm honest with myself, maybe not. It's the ability to be comfortable expressing your thoughts and feelings to others, the ability, the impotence to reach out, you know, and I'm struggling. I want to talk to my friends. I want to talk to someone. I want to gather together the people in my life that are important to me to help me in this time. So that impulse to reach out is very, very resilient. And it gives you, not only does it give you just that sense of validation and speaking to someone, but when we get the thoughts and all of the chaos out of our head and actually start speaking about what's bothering us, we actually will hear in our own voices the contradictions, the extremes, the unhelpful ways that we are viewing something that is kind of keeping us stuck in our negative view or keeping us stuck and feeling helpless. So reaching out is really important to help us be able to actually forecast how bad is the potential problem. How am I really coping? And also getting feedback from others. So these four are kind of the fundamental uses for resilience. It's what we really want people to engage in a way that can help them with the challenges that we're experiencing. So now I thought I'd give you a few tricks for the trade. This is sort of my idea of maybe little tips that you can take away from this talk that might prove useful. I call them thinking traps, and I've been reading this book, The Resilience Factor, which we can put a link to, I think, later if you're interested. Some excellent research done. What I like about all of this is years and years of research where people have participated in studies. This isn't something that's somebody's idea that they just think this sounds good. This is actually years and years of research that has proven to be very helpful to people. Now, the goal of me identifying these 8 thinking traps for you is not to point a finger and say, see, this is where you're wrong. This is what you're doing wrong. It's actually to help you identify maybe where there's some challenges. And then those are the areas if we work together, those are the areas that we would concentrate on. It's your vulnerabilities. It's the places in which you struggle. And trust me, if you identify yourself in any of these 8 or more than one of these 8, you're not alone. I see myself in many of these, as maybe you will too. If you do, that's actually a positive, because in that is the sense that you're starting to identify maybe where your self-talk does help kind of keep you stuck in some more challenging coping strategies. These are rigid ways of thinking. These are ways that we keep ourselves stuck in our worldviews. And they're kind of feel like they're automatic pilot. They're very habitual. They've been developed over years. We've developed them ourselves, and they're coping strategies that we've developed. But what happens is, after a period of time, they serve to stop us from being able to move out of a certain thinking pattern, hence the word trap. So I'm just going to run through them so you can kind of understand them a little bit better. So the first one is jumping to conclusions. So, you know, that's pretty self-explanatory, but that idea that a problem has presented itself, or a situation, a negative situation has presented itself, and it's then your conclusion, you're already seeing the situation, seeing it through all the way in your mind, and you've already got a negative outcome for the end. Jumping to conclusions almost never include us jumping to a positive conclusion. It's usually us in our fight or flight sort of panic mode, where we've now decided, oh, here's a problem, and I already see how bad this is going to go. It's that internal dialogue that just says, oh, see, this is happening. I knew it, and there's no way I can cope with this, and this is how this is going to go, and I'm never going to do this well again. It's that negative reinforcement of the conclusion that we have jumped to. We don't know the conclusion yet. We don't know what's going to happen, but we are already forecasting it's for ourselves in a very negative way. Tunnel vision is one of those where there's a lot to see, there's a lot to understand, but we tunnel in on the negative. We look for the negative to validate what we've already decided is bad about the situation or challenging the situation. So if something happens, there can be positives and negatives to it. Maybe this is the pivot for a new career for you, or a way in which your company is going to grow or expand or change. And your tunnel vision is already noticing the challenge, and you're already maybe then moving to jumping to a conclusion that it's going to be a bad outcome. So tunnel vision is getting rid of anything that could possibly challenge your belief that this is bad or that this isn't going to work out. And you're making sure you just view the situation that's going to validate that you already know it's bad. Magnifying and minimizing is sort of like tunnel vision, but it's where you are looking to magnify the challenges, looking to magnify the portion of the challenges that are bad or hard, and you minimize anything that maybe is easy or that is going well. And when I was looking at this morning, it reminded me of, I have a good friend who is in a band, and she branched out on her own a couple of years ago to write and produce a musical play. And we went to see it in Lower Manhattan, and it was spectacular. And I was so in awe of her creating this out of nothing. It was this beautiful piece. And afterwards, she came up and she said, "How did you like it?" I said, "It was amazing." And her face kind of fell. And I said, "Well, I really liked it." And she's like, "This was like the, pre-production presentation. Like, this is no way done. I have so much more work to do. I see so many problems. But if you liked it, then that means, maybe it's not as has the potential to be as good as I thought, because you think it's good already." She somehow magnified my compliment to be something that validated for her that it wasn't good. And I didn't know what to say to that, because I'd already complimented her and I was kind of stuck. But she wanted it to think of it a certain way, and no matter what happened, even an external compliment, she refused to see that. She minimized my compliment, magnified what she believed was a problem, and that's her belief system. Moving on to personalizing, I think that's one of those things where everything's my fault, right? So everything that happens is because I'm no good at that, or that's not something I know what to do with, or once again, see, that just proves good things never happen for me. It's personalizing, turning everything into being something personal about you. That somehow the pandemic is payback to you for something you've done, or you deserve what's going wrong for you right now. Externalizing is really just the opposite of that, where you blame everyone else. So it's no less damaging, and it's not helpful, but it's about just sort of saying everything out there is, or everyone out there is at fault. This presentation didn't go very well because it's dark and rainy here in Manhattan right now. I knew that was going to happen. That always happens to me. Everything is seen as someone else's fault, but it just verifies for you why it's not good. Overgeneralizing is one of those things that maybe you look at things and just sort of, you see this situation, or you see a challenge, or you don't get that job you apply for, or something's been canceled, and you just say, yep, see, I knew it. Everything's always bad. Nothing ever happens easy for me, or maybe I'm a bad person, or maybe it's just par for the course. This is the way my life goes. It's overgeneralizing. Another word, maybe catastrophizing, making everything really big and making sure that your view of it is that nothing ever works out. Mind reading is a kind of funny one that it's only funny because I think I've heard it between partners when they argue sometimes. It's about you decide you already know what someone else is thinking. You know, you've already decided. An example would be maybe your boss emails you and says, can we meet tomorrow morning? And for the next 12, 14 hours, you in your mind have decided what they're going to talk to you about. You've made up a whole problem in your mind, and you're sure of it. And so you just reinforce in your mind that he's asked you to meet to reprimand you or fire you or let you know that you did something wrong. We used to live I'm from Denver, Colorado, and we used to live in an area where the homes were really close together. And so like our kitchen window butted right up against our neighbor's kitchen window. And we knew them really well. They were lovely people, but they did have a tendency to have their arguments in the kitchen, which was unfortunate for us, or fortunate, I guess, if you're into that sort of thing. But we could hear those arguments like they were going on right in our own kitchen. And the funny one, when I think about mind reading, is they were having an argument about something, and the husband just sort of yelled out, why don't you just tell me what I'm thinking? Because every time he said something, she said, no, that's not what you're thinking. You're thinking this. So she was mind reading throughout the whole argument, and she was mad at him pretty much for reasons in her own head that she had decided he was thinking, and didn't even give him a chance to dispute it. So mind reading is something to really be careful of. I see it with my clients all the time. Well, they'll forecast what someone else is already thinking. My coworker thinks I'm stupid. My boss doesn't think I'm any good because he didn't say good morning to me this morning. Be careful about how you mind read and how you interpret what you think people are already thinking. And the last one is emotional reasoning. And that's where you make sense of the situations purely by emotion. So your emotional response to something is everything. And you've decided, I feel bad about that, so therefore it's bad. You can even feel good about something, but it could be purely from an emotional standpoint and without any real facts to back it up. I could end this talk and think, I feel so relieved. It went fantastic. Well, my relief is the emotion. That doesn't really say that the talk went well. The feedback will tell me if the talk went well. So the emotional response to something is not something that you can fully trust because it doesn't always have a factual basis attached to it. So being careful to notice if you're feeling quite emotional about something or you're having an emotional response, but you don't give it all the credit. It's not all the facts. I always, if I start thinking about something at 10, 11 o'clock at night, last night thinking about this presentation, get a little nervous, making sure, start thinking, I better run through it again 2 more times in the morning. What if I don't have it down? But then you start to feel that little bit of that anxiety. And then any of these thinking traps could quickly come in. I'm not prepared. I'm never do a good job. It's always my fault. It's always someone else's fault. Any of these could have come in. But I have a habit of saying to myself, if I start thinking of anything in the evening, is I just stop it. This is not a useful time. It's not useful for me to start running through this, because I'm not going to run through the presentation right now. It's 11 o'clock. I'm tired. I'm feeling fatigued. I don't feel on top of my game right now because I need to rest. And resting, it will be the exact right thing for me in order to feel like I can get up in the morning and do this presentation in a good way. So paying attention to your emotions and not letting them run the show. So these thinking traps, if you've seen yourself in any of these, like I've said, this is not a problem. This is actually the good news, because this is how you start to identify the way in which you think and the way in which you talk to yourself that maybe traps you or keeps you stuck in some rigid views. Any of these thinking traps, if let to go, just kind of running on their own a bit, like automatic pilot, can undermine and erode your confidence, as you can imagine. They can undermine and erode your sense of mastery, your sense of ability, and therefore you don't feel competent to manage. So think about what you've now done. You've depleted yourself of a sense of mastery. So when the challenges do come, when you do have to pivot, or you have to think, or you have to present, or you have to come up with a new way to do something, you're already depleted. You already feel less capable. So the hard work is changing these patterns, and how do we do it? How do we change these patterns? Well, that's the hard work in therapy, or, on your own, if you feel capable or start working on this. That's where the long-term work comes in. You have to become aware of this, and then you have to catch it and actually counteract it. So for an example would be, I have a thought that something is my fault. Then I start to go down that rabbit hole that says, oh, I always screw up. Why can't I do things the right way? And start to notice that in your mind and think, oh, I recognize that. I see what I'm doing. I'm personalizing this problem. I'm going down that rabbit hole. What would be a different way to think about this? What would be a more global way that I could step back and see it in a way that I could then alter what I'm doing, or change in some way to bounce back from adversity and learn something from what's gone on, to be able to steer through a problem and not feel it that it's always bad things that happen to me, that nope, this is just a problem that needs to be dealt with and I'll steer through it. Or thinking about what I talked about earlier on the bounce back, trying to make meaning, maybe making something purposeful out of a challenge, so that you could then pivot in a way that you make it a different thing that's more meaningful to you.
Hello.
All right. Did I hear someone? All right, so that's basically my presentation. I just wanted to leave you with this thought, which is kind of what I've been preaching for the last 45 minutes. The stuff of our lives doesn't change. It's who we change in relationship to it. Molly Bass. So it's thinking about our own reaction to things and the way in which we then can alter our own thinking as a way of managing through it. And that's that.
Thank you, Bonnie. That was fantastic, and I think really really on topic, obviously, with everything that's going on right now. And definitely there was quite a lot of comments that that popped up during that. So yeah, a lot of people, when you were starting off talking, when you asked us if we were talking negatively to ourselves, yeah, a couple of people said they were. I myself, I definitely guilty of that. I feel guilty, and I talk badly to myself if I haven't got out of bed, early enough to do some exercise or whatever it is. You start blaming yourself. We had resilience is grit, inner strength, intent balanced with willingness. Definitely resilience to me is building up a series of strategies that you can do in your day-to-day life was help you naturally respond to challenging situations when they arise. Absolutely, it's exactly what it is. And resilience is also positive outlook, irrespective of difficulties, or seeing the best in a bad situation. And I think at the moment, and I think I probably could speak for a lot of people that are here today, is that, you know, everything that's happened this year, and for a lot of us, we have lost our jobs. We don't have we don't have, we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing right now, and it's been very hard. And I think that we need to keep this chat of resilience going. You know, we need to really kind of keep talking about it, so that we're all kind of keeping as positive as possible, because obviously we don't know. And as you talked about, it's about the unknown. And I think as planners, and especially for myself working in events and being a planner, it's the worst thing in the world at the moment, because you just can't plan. So it's, you know, it's a nightmare. And I think, you know, you were talking about, you know, when we analyzing situations, you know, when we're mind reading, I think there's a couple of us that are definitely guilty of mind reading too much into situations. And I think probably a reason of that, and I don't know whether you agree with this, Bonnie, is whether or not we feel like that because we feel quite, I suppose, inferior at the moment. We feel we've got a lot of self-doubt, especially if we haven't got our jobs at the moment, and we may be perhaps applying for jobs and being rejected, and so you become quite self-aware of why you're being rejected, and then you start reading into things. Would you say that's true, Bonnie?
Exactly. And I think that's where, you know, there's an example of that external factor, you know, the real, anybody who's been unemployed, anybody who's looked for a job, you know, universally, you say to somebody, I'm unemployed, they just go, oh, it's the worst. You know, it's like, everybody knows it's a terrible, terrible time. When I moved back from London, there was a period there when I just was in flux. I didn't know what I wanted to do. And so in the applying for jobs and not really knowing, you know, just I remember just not even getting interviews and just feeling completely, I'd gone from a full thriving practice in London to unemployment, and just that feeling like I didn't understand the world. I didn't understand how to navigate. And I remember saying to my husband after another day of sending out, you know, resumes and not hearing anything, it's like, what happened to me? Like, I thought I was good at my job. And he said, this isn't personal. They haven't even met you. Like, they don't know you. You have no idea what they're going through on their end. You know, it could have been a million different things, but most likely wasn't about me, because I hadn't even had an interview. So that's that, right? That mind reading, and also personalizing, making it about me, that this somehow must be about a negative thing for me. So these are where those thinking traps, they're normal to have, of course, but then we run with it. You know, we just let it run, automatic pilot. We don't check it. And so it just feeds itself. And the external events of COVID and the pandemic and jobs and careers, it's certainly challenging. But then what we're doing is throwing salt in the wound by our own negative self-talk. We are making that problem even bigger, and then robbing ourselves of the very thing we need to get through this, which is resilience, and the need for us to be able to try to pivot and to come up with new ideas and be creative. We rob ourselves with that by the perpetual self-talk. So it's normal and it's expected, but catching it as soon as we can and really counteracting it as quickly as we can, whether it's with, you know, some more positive contrast to that. Like when you say something negative, you've got an answer for it, and maybe you need to write those down so that you can really start to bring them into your consciousness. I'm not a big like positive affirmation person, because I think this stuff is kind of deeply rooted, but I do think it helps to sort of catch it and say, oh, why do I think this is about me? Like, why am I feeling so bad about myself right now? The whole world is struggling with this. So of course this is hard, but it doesn't mean I stink. You know, it doesn't mean I'm hopeless. It just means I'm struggling, period.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that probably answers actually Nicole's question. She said, is anyone else suffering from imposter syndrome and self-doubt, especially in certain situations, i.e. when you think others might know more than what you do on certain topics? And I think, you know, that all relates back. I mean, I know, you know, I can speak for myself. I'm definitely guilty of imposter syndrome when I'm comparing myself to others. And I think that the problem at the moment, a lot of it at this time, is social media. And I've spent a lot of time trying to keep off social media through this whole crazy situation, because I feel like you really, when you are feeling quite vulnerable about your situation, kind of feeding off social media is definitely the worst thing that you can do. So if that's where your kind of imposter syndrome's coming from, then I would definitely say cut it off and try and look at other things. But I also think as well, it's all about communication. And again, I don't know whether you would agree with that, Bonnie. It's about communication and talking to other people about how you're feeling. And especially, there's so many of us in the same situation at the moment. And I know from an Eventwell community, it's been, you know, Eventwell has been a fantastic opportunity for so many of us to kind of connect and make us feel like we're not alone, which is great. But I think, you know, it's communication. And as you just said, you know, writing things down, I think there's nothing worse than festering in your own thoughts. Get them out down on paper. I don't know if anyone else wants to comment on that at all, but yeah, that's certainly what I do when I'm feeling stuck.
I think the imposter syndrome is, I think, you know, so many people suffer from that sense of, you know, who am I? I don't know what I'm talking about. I felt that about 15 minutes before this talk started. You know, all of a sudden everything just gone from your mind and you think, I don't know anything. I don't know why I'm talking. Let's have someone else talk.
Yeah.
I think it's just part of it. It really is part of it. And once again, it's recognizing it, seeing it. You know, it's like, oh, that thought popped up. I recognize you, you old friend. You always try to get me when I'm stressed, or you try to knock me down when I'm feeling vulnerable. I recognize you. I'm not giving into it today. And it's just one of those, really making it a more conscious thought. And like you said, maybe saying it to someone. Like I said, was said to my husband, like, I'm never going to be hired. Nobody wants me. It's like, what do you mean nobody wants you? Like, nobody knows you. You know, it's having somebody kind of snap you out of it a little bit sometimes and give you a dose of reality.
Yeah.
Being unemployed right now does not mean anything about you other than you're living in a pandemic. You know, I mean, that's just it. It's not a personal thing.
Yeah.
But it's hard not to take it that way when your career is on the line and you need work and you've got all those worries, and then you start to do that, you know, that habitual therefore thinking that judges your situation.
Yeah.
So that's where you just, I can't fix the external. If I could, you know, do away with anybody being born into vulnerable situations or any sort of abusive situations or people struggling right now, that's not what can be fixed. But what can be fixed is your process in dealing with it. The way in which you see yourself in the challenge is a way in which to try to see, you know, silver lining kind of is a funny phrase, but I do think trying to see the good. And that's why I said I refused to cancel 2020, because I got a beautiful granddaughter out of 2020.
Congratulations.
Yes, there's been a lot of other stuff. Thank you very much. I think I've mentioned her several times. I did refrain from putting a picture of her in the slideshow, so I wasn't quite that bad. But you know, there's that generalizing things, and then just being able to say, actually, no, this isn't all bad, and there's opportunities out of it. You know, there are things that can change with ways you would have never thought about doing something, or a career that maybe you didn't even know you could do. But that imposter is definitely about comparing. So I agree with you on that one. Being really careful not to decide that, you know, everyone else is doing great and you're not. People just aren't showing it. You know, people are trying to just get through, and you are not alone. You are not alone. I have a private practice that can attest to that. You are not alone. People are struggling, and it's justified.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. I think, and sometimes it's very hard to try and put a positive spin on things, but you know, I'm a big believer in, for everything a reason. And you know, in these times, I think we definitely have to look at positives that are going to come out of this. I mean, from an event world perspective, I think, you know, a lot of us are in a similar situation, and I think as I said before, it's been great for us to be able to connect with each other and kind of bounce off each other with perhaps new ideas and what may happen in the future for our industry. But also, you know, I think we also need to look at this time as kind of reflection, and looking at other things that we can do and kind of thinking outside the box and doing a new hobby or whatever it may be, or, you know, or being grateful to spend time with family, or, you know, there's a whole number of things. I think if you actually took stock and sat down, you could probably write at least a list of maybe 5-10 things that actually are positive that have come out of the situation. So, but it's hard to do. It's not, you know, you have to really think about it sometimes. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I didn't mention that. Gratitude is a big one. I think gratitude is a big one. Trying to look for opportunities in your life and ways in which you can look at things and be grateful for that. You know, I'm grateful that I got to do this. You know, this wouldn't have happened because I'm in Manhattan, you know. So it's just looking for little and big ways to be grateful for what you do have.
Exactly. It's exactly that, because obviously if we hadn't been doing these sessions, well, we wouldn't be doing these sessions if it wasn't for COVID, probably, and we would never have met you, Bonnie. So there you go. It's a prime example. So we're very grateful that we have met you. But yeah, no, I'm a big believer in gratitude. So yeah, if anyone's got a gratitude diary, or if you haven't got one, go and get one, because it's great. Oh yeah, yep. Charlie says gratitude helps me so much. To do it every morning. Write a list of 3 to 5 things I'm grateful for. It can be completely simple to the sun is shining. Yes, exactly. Or that I'm grateful that I've had a good sleep, or whatever it may be. You mentioned actually before, Bonnie, there was a book you were saying called The Resilience Factor. Who was the author?
Oh yeah. So I've got it right here. Is that backwards?
Oh,
backwards.
I can't even see it. The Resilience Factor. Who's it by? Who's the book? Oh.
So it's two people. I'm going to say their names wrong, but it's Karen Reivich, Reivich, and Andrew, I think it's Shatte, Shatte. And they're both psychologists.
Okay.
And yeah, and
in the chat
it's
box,
full of
guys,
research.
I write that down.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good book.
It's a great one.
Yeah, I think it's good to put on the list of positive things at the moment. Definitely. If anyone
there's a quiz in there.
Oh, it's a quiz. Oh, I love a quiz.
You perked up. There's a quiz in there to test your resilience, which I liked a lot, because I think it did highlight where my vulnerabilities are for me, and that's where I discovered that I'm not so good at reaching out and asking for help. So yeah, there's a quiz in there. I think that is really useful.
Okay, good. Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'll definitely put that on the list of things in Amazon to order. Guys, if anybody's got any further comments or questions, in fact, you don't even have to type in the box. If you want to put your camera on and mic on, then feel free. But yeah, I think everyone's feeling a bit shy today. That's fair enough. It's coming to tea time. But I think it was a great session, Bonnie. Thank you so much again for doing this with us today. And as I said, it's a great topic. I think it's a topic that we need to keep talking about, and you know, trying to stay positive. And obviously, if anybody wants to reach out to Bonnie after this session, then obviously you can either contact Bonnie directly, or if you want to contact myself or anyone of the team at Eventwell, just pop us an email, and we can certainly introduce you to Bonnie. But if there's no other questions or comments, then how are we doing for time anyway? Oh, wow. Gosh, 5:59. There we go. It's the end of the session anyway. That's perfect timing. I didn't even realize.
Perfect.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thanks so much again, Bonnie. Lovely to see you, and lovely to see all of you as well that have joined us today. I hope you have been able to take something away from the session, and yeah, hopefully we'll see you all again soon. Thanks, guys. See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.